We are undoubtedly living in the plastic age. Plastic is an integral part of our lives, but the evidence is becoming more damning by the day that our plastic usage cannot go on as it is. The problem of plastic is now a topic on most people's radar. But why is this useful man-made material so problematic? First, we need to go back to basics and understand what it actually is. Plastics are synthetic polymers. Poly means many, and a polymer is just a repeating chain of a group of molecules. Take polyvinyl chloride for instance. Its base group is vinyl chloride. String a load of them together and you get polyvinyl chloride, PVC for short. There are natural polymers such as DNA, starch, lignin, the building blocks of wood, but our plastics are synthetic polymers made mainly from oil-derived hydrocarbons. Plastic is an incredibly varied and versatile material. Take polystyrene. This CD jewel case shows polystyrene in its rigid, transparent form, whereas this packaging is made of expanded polystyrene. Same base material, just a different manufacturing method with very different results. Plastic is so essential to modern life that 8% of the world's oil production is used to make the stuff. Since the 1950s, plastic production has increased 20-fold. In the next 20 years, it'll double again. Once all the things that plastic has been used for are thrown away, they have to go somewhere. 9% is recycled, 12% is incinerated, and a staggering 79% is in landfills, or has found its way into the environment. And that's the big problem. Plastic in the environment. 8 million tons of plastic make their way into the oceans every year. By 2050, the plastic will outweigh all the fish in the oceans combined. Plastic in the ocean causes a multitude of problems. 10,000 turtles have been trapped in discarded fishing nets in the waters around Australia alone, for example. Seabirds and fish mistake plastic for food and eat it, and their stomachs can fill up to a point where they can no longer eat actual food, so they starve. Even if the animals don't eat enough plastic to cause starvation, ocean plastics absorb other pollutants, such as mercury. These build up in the animal system and can be passed up the food chain, which of course includes us. Plastic in the oceans does gradually break down, due to the UV radiation present in sunlight. As it does so, it disintegrates into smaller and smaller particles, into what are known as microplastics. These can be mere nanometers in length, so they are small enough for microscopic plankton to eat. From there, they can accumulate and quickly work their way up the food chain, and these microplastics can, and do, end up in our food. They have been found in fish, but they also have been found in honey, salt, beer, and even tap water. Research into the effects of microplastics on humans is in its infancy, but the initial findings are not positive. So why exactly does plastic take such a long time to break down? It all comes back to those long chains of molecules with their tough bonds. This toughness is what makes plastic such a useful and resilient material, but nature simply doesn't have the means to deal with them. If a piece of wood finds its way into the ocean, then bacteria goes to work on the bonds that hold it together. But bacteria just cannot do the same thing with plastic, so it takes decades for even a thin carrier bag to be broken down. Now, that's only a small selection of the problems associated with plastic, but there are some very good reasons why it is so widely used and why finding alternatives is far from straightforward. Plastic is used in some critical settings. Operating a hospital without plastic is impossible at the moment. From protective gear to syringes, plastic is everywhere. Supermarkets have come under fire lately for their excessive plastic packaging of fresh produce. Some of this is indeed wasteful and needs to be addressed, but there are a few complicating factors that also need to be considered. Food sealed in packaging lasts longer and is more resilient to damage, and plastic is by far and away the cheapest material for the purpose. Let's say we've been tasked with designing a fancy new bread packet to reduce food wastage by 5%, and by extension, the carbon emissions of wastage by 5%. This new packaging could even have a larger carbon footprint than the original packaging, but as long as the carbon footprint doesn't more than double, and the new packaging achieves the aim of reducing food waste, then we are still lowering the overall emissions. This is because baking the bread, and therefore wasting bread, is far more resource intensive than producing the packaging. This is not to say that we shouldn't be looking for biodegradable packaging or one that has a lower carbon footprint, but it illustrates that these things are not so simple and clear-cut. I've delved into another example of how complex these problems are in another video, linked below, exploring the issues of banning plastic bags. Plastic has a bad rap, and a lot of it is well deserved, but we need to keep an open mind when working towards a solution for our plastic problem. This seems to conflict with a lot of the messages coming from governments and environmental groups who tend to stick to clear and unambiguous messaging, but this doesn't allow for explaining the nuances of the situation. 90% of the plastic pollution entering the oceans via rivers comes from developing countries. Logic suggests that foreign investment in the waste disposal infrastructure of such countries would yield more impactful results in comparison to some of the more visible, but ultimately less effective schemes operating in more developed countries. There is another major problem with plastics, which is sustainability. Almost all of them are created from fossil fuel derived hydrocarbons. As oil reserves run ever lower, we need to decouple plastic production from dependence on fossil fuels. Progress is being made in the production of sustainable polymers. Plastics derived from renewable sources such as starchy plants or vegetable oils. The trouble is we need to advance these products to a level where they can effectively compete with their oil-based counterparts. Tailoring these sustainable polymers to have the right heat resistance, durability and appearance whilst remaining affordable is the next great challenge. There are already a great many products that are using sustainable polymers. This cosmetics tube uses a sugarcane-based polymer as its base, and these food wraps are made using beeswax and cotton. Many businesses are moving away from plastic where possible too. Plastic-free shops are on the rise, and the good old-fashioned milkman is making a comeback, due in no small part to the reused glass bottles the milk arrives in. The persistent plastic problem is one that we need to tackle, and more urgently than we are doing at the moment. But in doing so, we need to make sure that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Plastic alternatives have their benefits and drawbacks just as plastics do, and we need to look at the bigger picture to make the best choices for the environment in the long term. If you liked the video, perhaps consider subscribing.